behind them. KC Cares is the intersection of the profit and nonprofit communities, making Kansas City a better place to live, work, and play. This KC Cares segment is brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, www.kauffman.org. I'm Ruth Baum-Biggis. Kansas City is a sports town, and nothing says it's louder and prouder than having two major sporting events coming up in the metro: the 2023 NFL football draft, and then the FIFA World Cup in 2026. Well, these things don't just happen in our community. There are movers and shakers that work for years to bring these high-level events to town and cast the international spotlight here in the Midwest. Well, did you know that one of the major players in making all these events happen is a nonprofit? It's the Kansas City Sports Commission and Foundation and Win KC. There are two things, headed by Kathy Nelson as its president and CEO. We are so lucky to capture time with Kathy because she's crazy, crazy busy. And we're grateful that you can spend a little time with us and talk really about what the commission is and does and what it's all about. Best place to start. How old is the commission?
Ruth, it is crazy. The commission is, 55, 56 years old now. We're the oldest sports commission in the country.
That is amazing. And tell us a little bit about the roots. How was this formed and who had the foresight to do this?
Well, there were a small group of gentlemen that actually were working to make sure that the Kansas City Chiefs stayed in Kansas City. So they got together and they were really working hard on selling season tickets to prove to the team that Kansas City wanted and needed to keep a professional football team. From there, the Kansas City Sports Commission kind of bloomed and blossomed, if you will. And then from there in 1982, we added, so we're a C6 on the commission side. And then in 1982, we added the Kansas City Sports Foundation, which is our C3 piece of our entity. And that really, between those two, focuses on making our city better through sports.
All right. For folks who may not know what a C6 is, let's know what a C3 is. What's the difference?
Yeah, the difference is C6 allows us to do more of a business behind the scenes with things. We're able to lobby as needed for different legislation. So kind of operates similarly, but yet our C3 side of our business is very much focused on amateur and youth sports and those events.
Well, those guys were certainly smart to try to figure out, because here's the Chiefs. They're still here. Hooray, hooray.
Yep, that's true.
Now you say oversee, bring to town, etc. Major sporting events. Let's talk a little bit about the depth and breadth. What all are you dealing with? There's a lot of stuff.
Right. We really look at our business, our nonprofit, almost in three different pillars, and we tier everything that we're working on. We have a tier 1, a tier 2, 3, and 4. And that ranges. We have a staff that focuses on, obviously, every year we want to host a tier 1 event, which really is kind of Big 12 in a way. Big 12 men's and women's basketball for us is certainly a tier 1, where that brings national, international media attention. It fills hotel rooms. It brings a lot of economic lift to the city and that spotlight. Then you go all the way down to a tier 4, and where we think of tier 4 events as, what are we doing to encourage kids to participate in sport? And even though that may not seem as important across for our staff, that certainly carries as much weight. When we have our Win for KC program and arm that falls under our C3, and that very much, Win for KC, is focused on elevating, allowing people to participate in sport, especially young girls and women in sport. So our organization is set up so that our focus, we have as much focus on Camp Win and our Kansas City Triathlon as we do Big 12, even though in the public side, they're different. Obviously, there's a different impact to our community. Our staff certainly feels the weight of all of those equally.
I want to talk about Win for KC because sometimes I don't think it gets as much attention, let's say, in the media as some of the other, quote, sexy events like Big 12 and Draft.
Yeah.
Share with us why maybe even how that came about and why that is really integrally important here in our community.
So back in the early 1990s, which doesn't seem like that long ago, right? When you say it out loud, but yes, almost 30 years now, there were a group of people that was working on bringing the Women's Sports Foundation out of New York, making their headquarters in Kansas City. So there was a bid put in place, all of that, all the business that comes with attracting a group like that here to make this their permanent residence. So Kansas City was unsuccessful in landing the Women's Sports Foundation in Kansas City, but that same group said, why aren't we doing something like this? Our community is well deserving of celebrating women and girls in sport, and we should be doing something. About that same time, maybe a year to not quite 2 years later, we were also hosting the NCAA Women's Final Four, which is how I got involved. So I was on the production side for the Women's Final Four in Kansas City and worked behind the scenes with a lot of the people that were starting to figure out what do we do in Kansas City as a women's sports foundation. So started to meet, a lot of conversations around that. There certainly were some champions, Brenda Van Langen being one of them, of getting this off the ground. And really it came about of we should do something, whether it's advocating, hosting, supporting, facilitating, all of that, and really igniting that spark of women and girls in sport. So it launched by mid-90s and took off. And it's always been a program under the umbrella of the Kansas City Sports Foundation. And from there, it's totally bloomed and grown beyond anyone's wildest dreams. I served on the board for many years. I chaired the luncheon. I was honored to be the luncheon chair back when Billie Jean King in 2010 was our speaker. And then actually that same year, then our Win for KC director decided to move on. And so the president of the Sports Commission approached me and said, hey, we think you should come work for us. And my background's in television. And it was a difficult decision, but not really for me when it came to how do I then lean in as a full-time employee now to really grow that? So I became the Win for KC director in 2010. And then from there, again, all the great changes and things that have happened.
And let's share that with the audience. I'm not certain we all understand all the things that you oversee. You wear a lot of hats, lady.
Yes. Yeah. Especially now. So I serve now as president and CEO for the Kansas City Sports Commission and Foundation. Of course, Win for KC is one of our programs that we have here. Of course, our top program. I also now serve as president and CEO for Visit KC. So I am a shared CEO between two separate entities, completely separate entities. I have two offices, two staffs, two board of directors. I hop between offices, multiple computers, multiple phones, but serving as CEO for both. And there's a lot of, I wouldn't say similarities because they're very different, but there's a lot of work that's done jointly between the two organizations when it comes to things like attracting the Big 12 or NFL Draft or World Cup. There certainly is a piece of Visit KC that leans into that from their sports sales team and their marketing and PR. And then, of course, Sports Commission leads those bid efforts. And then the Sports Commission serves as the event team that makes those things happen. So whether it's a parade or Big 12 or, like we've mentioned, NFL Draft, all of those things fall under my umbrella now with CEO of both entities.
Okay, I want to know when somebody approached you and said, Kathy, we have an idea for you. How would you like to be the head of two nonprofits with multiple arms? What went through your head at that time?
Well, the conversation actually didn't start that way. Visit KC was without a CEO late summer of 2021. I have to go back and think through the years, right? 2021. And I've been on the Visit KC board of directors for, probably close to 8 or 9 years now. So I certainly know the organization. I travel with them. We, use staff from Visit KC that works on our bids and presentations with us. So knew the organization, knew it well. the board chair, past chair, and incoming chair all approached me, took me to breakfast. And I thought it was, hey, would you help us and lead the search committee for the CEO for Visit KC? And I had prepared and had practiced saying no. Like, my husband thinks it's so funny, but I truly look in the mirror and go, no. Like, I have to practice saying no. So he's like, you're crazy. I'm like, they're going to ask me to chair the search committee. Well, I get there and immediately it was, we want you to run Visit KC. And of course, they're not really familiar. They know what the Sports Commission is and does, but don't know how it operates. And at one time, the conversation was, do we absorb Sports Commission under Visit KC? Do we absorb Visit KC under Sports Commission? And the two of them are so uniquely different and so strong and have such a national footprint. It just doesn't make sense to combine them. But I shared with them, there's a model, Cleveland, Ohio has this, where there's one person that runs both entities, and here's how it works for him. So that's how the conversation turned, and then started to have a lot of serious conversations between both boards and the mayor. Mayor Lucas was heavily involved, as was even the lieutenant governor for the state of Missouri, who oversees tourism, who I've known for many years, of course, being at the state, working through things we do at the Sports Commission side. And he was the one that said, I need you to take this job. I need you to do this. So I had a lot of external pressure. Didn't really have a lot of time to think about it, other than I cared a lot about the staff and the people at Visit KC. I could see myself serving in a leadership role with that team.
So you took the job and you're in the mirror. No, didn't work.
No, didn't work.
Note to self, right?
Right.
So how do you, as the leader of two how do you balance? How do you run two things? I know you said you run between offices, but from really the grit of it, how do you make that happen?
Yeah. Well, it comes down to a lot of the successful people you surround yourself with, and the right people at the right time in the right positions. We, in the end of 2021, once we made it quietly aware to both staffs that these conversations were happening, I really had to make sure and check in on my Sports Commission staff, because this was going to be a very big change for them, that they were now sharing their CEO. And then visiting with the Visit KC staff, are you all okay? Are you aware of the situation? What do you have concerns about? And listening to people. Then those last few months of 21, we kind of practiced, as odd as that sounds. We walked through my weekly schedule and thought, well, what meetings can come off? Who can I have then on the Sports Commission side, maybe run those meetings and they don't need me, which was hard to get used to. Like, I'm not really needed, right? All of a sudden. And then the same thing with Visit KC. We would walk through a typical week for them. Where do you really need me? Where do you need me, physically and mentally? So that it started to really come right around Thanksgiving time, became pretty clear that Mondays at the Sports Commissions are heavy meeting days. We, have had NFL draft meetings. We have a team meeting. Wednesdays, we have leadership meetings. And then Tuesdays, oddly enough, at Visit KC, they've always had a standing leadership meeting, budget meetings, IT meetings. I'm like, well, that pretty much clearly, tells me physically where I need to be. So it's not easy, but I certainly have great people around me that check in on me, both physically and mentally. And then I certainly have really appreciated, I've always been in the mindset that a leader is supposed to grow other leaders. And this has provided me the opportunity on a much bigger scale to make sure that my leaders at both organizations are stepping in and stepping up.
Are you ever not in meetings? Do you get to, enjoy the work?
Yeah. That's an interesting question right now in this moment of time. So right now, my day is about 9 hours of meetings, and typically 3 nights a week, I have an event or something I need to attend. So I don't have much downtime now, which is a struggle for everyone, because every meeting, there's a task list. There's a work that has to be done to come out of those meetings, and I roll right into the next meeting. So we're trying to get better as two teams as to, okay, who's sitting next to Kathy that knows I'm going to take that, I'm going to do that. We need her aware and her involvement, but at some point, people have to take some of that work off, and everyone is working towards that. it is hard right now between managing two companies, and then we're figuring out and standing up. I shouldn't say figuring out, we're standing up the World Cup organization and hiring that staff. And then also we have NFL draft on our doorstep and the crazy month of March for us. So it's all day meetings right now. And that's okay. I mean, that's where you learn and collaborate and enjoy and network with your coworkers as well. So as much as I don't enjoy meetings, at some point, it's kind of that lift for me too.
Well, often you hear people who lead organizations, whether nonprofit or profit, it's tough at the top. Some people may laugh, but it's tough at the top because you are, excuse the sports metaphor, but you're balancing a lot of balls.
Yeah.
So how do you recharge? And what would be your advice to those leaders in the community of ways to be able to do that?
Yeah, I am a big believer in me time, or my husband and I, our two daughters are grown and have both live outside of Kansas City. My husband travels during the week. So for me right now, this workload works, but I am very particular about turning my phone off. I have two phones, turning both phones off. Of course, as I'm quieting down for the night. And then weekends, I try to, even though I work in sports and sports happen on weekends, try to at least keep a day where my husband and I are just, what are we doing at home? Are we have the fire going and watching a movie? Where's our quiet time? And I think we both are learning you have to unplug to make a relationship work, and just for peace of mind and sanity, because that screen time, no matter which screen, even television, really doesn't let me decompress. So for me, it's sitting outside. This is going to make me sound so old, but sitting outside in my rocking chair, just watching the sunset is one of my favorite things to do.
I don't think it makes you sound old. I just think it makes you sound relaxed, and you take that time, and yes. Kudos to you for being able to unplug in that way. Two phones. Kathy, you got to get rid of a phone.
I know, but then that is attached to a company, right? Like these are both attached to people. So it'd be difficult to do that.
Right. We're talking with Kathy Nelson. She is the president and CEO of the Kansas City Sports Commission and Foundation, which also has Win for KC, and she heads up Visit KC. What would you say is the biggest challenge of being that person at the top of a nonprofit? What keeps you up at night? Hopefully nothing, but.
Oh, no, there's a lot, especially when you look at what's on our radar and the events we have stacked on our plate. I think what keeps me up at night is I'm certainly a people person, and I want to make sure my staff feels engaged and they feel needed and they feel loved. So for me, it's, okay, my attention is shared between a lot of people. And I never want one staff to feel like I'm really not dialed in on what's happening on the other team. And I know there are certainly fires that pop up on both. And I'm trying to find that mix of, I might be sitting in the Sports Commission office one day, but I have my Visit KC computer opened and I'm texting and I'm on Teams and I'm taking phone calls. But then when I'm at the Visit KC office, some of my Sports Commission staff will come over there for meetings. So what keeps me up at night is, how do I, as a leader, portray how much I care? I think is what makes me nervous. There's a lot of things happening behind the scenes that our staff is involved in, even from a city level, a county, and a state level, politically. But at the same point, we're removed from all that, especially as a sports commission, not attached to a government entity, but getting so many people that feel like they can call and text and email me. I want my staff to know I'm right here. Like, come see me. And that's where I really feel the pressure of keeping everyone engaged and feeling fulfilled in their job.
How can you go about showing you care? I mean, I think there's always a fine line there as well. You want to be kind, caring. So what have you found are the best ways, or some tips?
Well, I don't know that I have anything that really works, but The great thing is we have little turnover. And to me, that always says a big message that, our staff is here. They're here for a long time. They love what they do. There's one thing during the pandemic, and I think this will stick with me for the rest of my career. So during the pandemic, there was an article that came out about a writer had said, gosh, the pandemic feels a little bit like a movie theater. He had been to a movie and was sitting there and the fire alarm had gone off. And, and you're sitting in a movie in a group of strangers and they came over the loud system and said, please remain calm, get up and walk to the nearest exit. And he really saw that people reacted in three different ways. There were some people that were like, there's a fire, we have to get out of here. And we're scrambling and running for the exit and creating chaos. There was a second group that were following orders, that were standing and calmly walking to the exits. And the third group was like, please sit down. I want to watch the movie, and putting popcorn in their mouth and like, this is fine. This is no big deal. And I read the article 3 times and thought, that's exactly how our staff reacted to the pandemic. That we had staff members that were like, we're falling apart. We're going to close the doors. This is all going to come unglued. Nobody's going to work again. The marathon's never going to happen again. Big 12 will never be back. And just panic set in. Another group was like, I get it. Let's have daily meetings. What are we going to do to keep championing forward? What are we going to do next? And then I had a couple other people that were like, there is nothing happening. This is fine. I'll see you at work tomorrow. I realized at that time, I have to learn to communicate and manage to each of those personalities. I can't be the same person to each of those groups. So I really had to take a step back and appreciate that people were scared and panicked. And I had to learn how to communicate and manage that. I also then had to really lean in to those people that were like, we can figure this out with you. We're going to remain calm, but we know change is ahead. And then I had to really work to encourage the people that were like, nothing's going on. It's all fine. But I had to change my leadership style 3 different ways. And I now see that I still have to do that. Even though we're kind of through the pandemic, I'm like, wow, that really is interesting that people respond and react differently to any situation. Playing in the NFL draft, planning potential Super Bowl celebration for a certain city and a certain team, right? Everyone reacts differently and it's okay. And you have to acknowledge that and manage that way.
Well, I don't know who wrote that article, but we would love to share that if you get your hands on it.
I will. I'll have to look for that. I want to say it was a Wall Street Journal article I caught, but I'll look for that for sure.
That's got to be kind of exhausting too, is communicating in 3 different ways with what you would hope you can just say, okay, this is it. We're moving forward.
Yeah.
But you want to.
Yeah. I mean, it's really not though. When you think about, it's probably less exhausting because you meet people where they are and they respond and react then kind of how you need them to. If I were to say, everything's fine, everyone sit down, let's get to work, the people that were panicked would not be able to focus and do that. So for me, it really creates that opportunity for everyone to react differently and get their work done, but knowing that they think about it differently.
I want to take a different tack with you if you'll play along. You are a high-level woman in I shouldn't say predominantly anymore. There are women in sports, absolutely. Billie Jean King being one of the ones who elevated everything. But you are in a business where there are a lot of men as opposed to women. How is that for you? How do you feel you're perceived? Is there any kind of nuances you have to play with?
Not necessarily anymore. I would say early on in my career, and I've always been in an industry or a career where women were the minority. Even now, my role as CEO of the Sports Commission, there's hundreds of us across the country, and I could probably name all 6 or 7 that are female. Yeah. So it's still certainly a small group of us, small but mighty and a lot of fun, but still there's not very many. So I think knowing and appreciating that. There's also one of my volleyball coaches had told me, I can't even remember how old I was, but he would say, boys have to fight to bond, girls have to bond to fight. And he goes, I just have to remember that. And I remember thinking, what a silly thing. And he would say that every so often. And I thought, that's just so bizarre. But now I look at that and go, what a great lifetime lesson that was. Because I can tell you, like, you and I would bond over a cup of coffee. But for me to bond to either my male staff or to other men in my industry, they need to know that I have some grit and some fight in me and that I'm not just a pushover. So, and the Big 12 is a great example. The commissioner that just recently retired, the first couple years of his tenure in that role, I was pushing him on the contract. I wanted to know how we keep him in Kansas City, what else he was expecting from the city. When he shows up, what does he need? And I was just like right in there all the time. And we really bonded over that. But had he been female, I would have approached that differently. I probably would have said, hey, I'll come to Dallas, let's go to lunch. Or when you're up here, let's go get a cup of coffee. That's not how I needed to form that relationship with him. So I think appreciating that boys and girls, men and women are different that way, that we bond differently to fight, has really helped me in my career to take a step back and really appreciate that. My background I mentioned is in television and production. I've worked a lot, decades, in a television production truck where was the only female on the crew. You're sitting there and the director might be yelling at you and it's like, you're an idiot. You didn't get that graphic called up fast enough, or you don't know what you're talking about. He didn't ever mean that because I was female. That's just how they treated each other in a production truck. And it took me a couple of times to take a step and go, oh my gosh, he's not being mean to me. That's just how he communicates with the other guys in the truck. Because as soon as that game or that race was over, he's like, let's go grab a beer. And I thought, that's how guys bond. They are completely like proving that they've got some fight in them. And then again, with my female counterparts and things, getting to know each other, I would go to battle with anybody now because I've gotten to know them as a person.
What a great lesson. And from a coach, that's a wonderful lesson. We just have a few minutes left. And I wanted to ask you, there's so much flurry, there's so much going on, such great stuff that you all are doing at every level. Have you had time to kind of think, what's 5 years from now? What's 10 years from now for the Sports Commission and for Kathy Nelson?
Right. So, yes. I mean, we are always working on projects years out. We're working on a bid right now for 2031 and 2033. So we certainly are working on some significant tier one opportunities for our city. We are always working on the strategy of what does it look like in 2027 once we get through World Cup, and how does our staff look? Certainly thinking about that. And then, of course, Win for KC. What are we doing to grow our base, to grow our donors, to grow our mission? We talk about that often because that's not something you say today and then it changes next month. Those, as you know, are years of work behind the scenes. So certainly on both Visit KC and the Sports Commission, and of course, Win for KC, working through what do we look like 5 and 10 years from now is certainly a topic that's discussed. And I've always been that way, I think, for whatever organization I've worked with or for. What does long-term mean? Because the decisions you make today impact those 2, 3, 4, 5 year outcomes. And then personally, as we get through World Cup, I'm so excited to think about 5 years from now. What's the legacy left behind? How are we celebrating everything? Kansas City, coming off the heels of the NFL draft. Couldn't be more excited to think about what 2027 looks like. I think I'll still be working, hopefully probably wearing 2 hats like I am now, maybe get my groove a little bit better, enjoying our daughters who are in their young 20s, and probably maybe 5 years from now, who knows where their lives are in their careers and with their families. But my husband and I both like to travel, and we're trying to get better once we get through some of these big events, that maybe I jump in on a business trip with him, or he can tag along on one of my trips over a weekend. We're not doing that now. We just don't have time, but maybe, 5 years from now could be something that we aspire to do.
Well, we're so lucky to have you helming these two organizations, and I don't know how you do it. Well, yes, I do, but I won't share what you shared with me. This lady, take her to lunch. She needs to eat good meals. She's doing lots of things, and we're lucky here in Kansas City to have you and have that foresight and putting us on the map. I think we probably have to put a microchip in you, so it's like, where's Kathy? Like, where's Waldo? Where's Kathy Nelson today? Because you're so busy. And thanks for your time and treasure and sharing it all with us.
Ruth, thank you.
Thank you for joining us on KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We're produced by a nonprofit, Charitable Communications. This KC Cares segment was brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. Now, if you'd like to be a guest on KC Cares or underwriting opportunities, visit our website. It's kccaresonline.org. Spread the love. You'll find us on Facebook and Twitter at KC Cares Radio and on Instagram at KC Cares Online. Don't forget, you can catch us Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. on ESPN 1510 AM and 94.5 FM. Thank you for joining us on KC Cares.